Well, that's a waste of a coffee mug.
My neighbor just had a ring the doorbell, and he needed some aluminum foil, and I answered the door, and I'm only dressed from the top up. Like
I
barefoot jeans and like a tie.
Can I just poke out my mind's eye now? Thank you.
Welcome to the Johnny Random Show. Today is Education Part 2. We did a very long discussion previous to this, and it was a lot of fun. Got a lot of really positive feedback, and we just weren't done with the topic, so we wanted to bring some things back. So we brought in some new guests this time, as well as a few of the ones that were on the previous episodes. So let's see, Rachel is first time on the channel. Officially on the channel, first time officially, and so that is my sister here. So we're gonna talk about the first question that I had on here that we wanted to bring up and discuss for this one was school funding and districting, and it was something that was sitting on the back of my mind that I meant to bring up in the last episode, and I think and the whole 2.5 hours that we talked, it never came up. I had an idea, and it was based on something that I think there was a New York Times article that was written that was talking about why are public schools so bad in some places, and then across the street they're so good, or in a different neighborhood that's in the same city. Why does that happen? And there was a part of a larger context of why are Democrat-run cities so bad, but it got into like gerrymandering, which happens in every city across the country. And basically the thing that I took away from that was, if you were to take, instead of having these districts all gerrymandered and cut out, and then the funding for these, because they include neighborhoods that are wealthy and cut out these other ones, that are not as well connected. And then they don't have money for their schools and their supplies and things, whereas across the street or on the other side of town, they have an abundance of supplies, and teachers are paid better in that district, and you're in the same city. And that shouldn't happen. I don't think it should happen. And I think that a solution that and not I just came up with, has been talked about, but that I support, is for like a county. So a county, all the money in the county is put into it, and then these districts are subdivided, but the funding it comes from is equally divided. So it doesn't matter where you are in the county, everybody's district gets an equal amount of money from it. So that is a solution. And I'm wondering if you guys have heard of that and what you thought of that as an idea, or do you think that there's any drawbacks to that idea? Matthew.
Well, I would say that it seems to me that giving everybody the same amount of funding, as far as like, I'm assuming what you mean is per student, same amount of money per student, because obviously a small county with few students shouldn't be having the same amount of money as the large ones. But giving them all the same amount of money may or may not be optimal. Just like off the top of my head, sometimes the needs are greater in one area than they are in another, and that would be treating. I think it was Aristotle who said that treating everyone the same is sometimes injustice. He said something along the line. At any rate, I'll have to look it up. But it's one of those things where if you treat everything as if it is the same when they're not, then it's more of a problem. So I would just caution against that. I don't know the full extent of the idea, and I'm kind of excited about it in general. I can see where, well executed, it could be pretty good.
Yeah, and something maybe at least better than a current situation, which is pitiful at best. Paul, right. Go to you on that, and then if you have anything else to add, throw it in.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with this. Every time I'm not on an episode and I go back and listen, I'm really frustrated that there's not a libertarian on this podcast.
You're the only one.
Yes. So government is the worst solution to just about to every problem we can come up with. And part of the problem with government being involved in education is good teachers, good administrators, students and parents become pawns for politicians' petty little power grabs. You can say we need better elites. I'm going to ask you, why do we need elites to begin with? We need better politicians. We need statesmen. Why? They might fix something for a few minutes, and then historically it breaks all over again. Education is the primarily is the responsibility of the parents. And there's a million different ways you can have educated children without the state involved. There's two of us here that are homeschool parents, and our tax dollars go to pay for local education, and we've a service that we don't use, and we have to come up with our own money for educating our children outside of the system. I've heard of or have seen or am involved in a co-op of one sort or another that has ways for parents to band together and teach each other's kids. And some parents aren't involved in the teaching in that program. Maybe they're involved in the administration, or maybe they just pay a fee for their kid to be in whatever class it is. My wife and I are not, we're not particularly skilled or gifted in hard sciences. So we were able to find a co-op or tutorial that we could put our boys through to meet the state hard science requirements. They tend to be more musical, and we've been involved in a homeschool music program that the boys have excelled in. There's a variety of ways that parents can pool together their interest, skill set, and resources and teach without having the government come in and say, well, this is what you have to do, this is how you do it, and yada, yada, yada.
Sure. And the only thing I would say to that before we go to Rebecca here is I think that what you're saying is part of the reason why, public school education can be a part of a solution, or the solution is, specialization, right? You said that you're not particularly, I'm getting attacked by a fly, is being, you weren't good at the hard sciences or didn't particularly feel like that was something that you wanted to teach. So you were able to find somebody that could do that for you. Whereas there's people that basically, I don't have, my time is better spent at a job and having my kids learn educated by someone else that, several different teachers that each one of them are able to add some value to the situation. And I totally understand,
Right.
that, but it's a similar concept, and it's in effect, it's using the free market, so to speak, to maximize each, what is the word that we talk about a lot on this episode? It's where you're breaking down what like blanking on the word. I need to just write this word down and keep it on the desk with me. Well, basically your
specialization of labor, something like that.
Yeah, something labor.
Yeah, economizing labor. I'm not sure.
Anyway,
division of labor.
Yes, the division of labor, where each parent, each aspect of their education is tackled, and so it can be efficient. So that's sort of a market, version and of what you're talking about and what you were able to do. So, but anyway, Rebecca, your thoughts on this districting and any other thoughts?
I actually think you should go to Rachel maybe next, because she looked like maybe she was had a thought there, and I just lost my thought. So
okay, yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
I think that I agree and disagree with what Paul was saying there. Just kind of to respond to that, because Yeah, I'm the other homeschool parent. Um, and I totally love the freedom that we have with homeschooling to really tweak and specialize, our kids' education to what their needs are, what their desires are, all of that. But at the same time, saying, like, I would love to have the government less a part of education, and a lot more freedom there. But at the same time, I don't know what it would look like to take education completely away from the government and to not have that. I'm kind of going, if you sit here and you go, this is the ideal, but at the same time you have, for homeschoolers, these are the people who are deeply invested in their children's education, who are willing to sacrifice for it and to, really go after that. But you have a lot of kids that don't have that. They don't have those parents that are invested in their education that way. And unless you completely change that, you know, I don't know how you would be able to just still give those kids what they need, by taking away government funding from education. And anytime that you have funding, you're going to have those regulations and stuff that just come along with that. So I don't know. I don't feel like there is a path to that that's easily, well, I just don't see a path to get there from where we are currently in the US. It's like, that's the dream, that's the goal, especially knowing the freedoms that, that I do have, as a homeschooling parent. I would love if everybody could have that. But I don't know how to get there. So, the one thing that I would say that I would love to have is if we didn't have so much of the politics in education that are kind of like, I feel like a lot of the negativity that you have towards education right now, where you have, the teachers that are all burned out and the parents who are all mad at the teachers, and, all of this stuff is all being fed by the political sides, where you have, and I don't, I don't know if we're even at that point in this, but you've got all of these issues that were being fed by the media that are very, very political, that are meant to drive an agenda on the right and the left, that are creating division and that are highlighting all the negativity, so that you do have things like, Matt, you and Dad in the last episode, saying, well, we've just got, idiot factories and all this, all the negatives and stuff. Whereas that's the mindset that you have in a lot of people, but it's not helpful. It's not helpful for our kids. It doesn't move us forward, and it doesn't bring us together to be sitting here thinking about how, how many bad things are going on. And even the Don't Say Gay bill that right now is, obviously nobody is even understanding what it actually means. On one side it doesn't seem like, and then the other side it's just like, well, they all want to indoctrinate our children and all of this. And it's like, is there not some way that we can actually talk together with people with honor and dignity and come together as a country for our kids?
Yeah. I really like that.
And that was a whole lot of thoughts kind of
Oh, it's
Sorry.
good. This is the Johnny Random Show because I don't always expect. I have 3 questions written down, and I expect this to go all sorts of places, which is good. Rebecca, did you have anything to add before I catch your thought?
Yeah, I guess my question is for Paul of what is your ideal schooling situation look like? Are you thinking like homeschooling is what everyone should be doing, or maybe kids shouldn't have to go to school if their parents don't care, or like, and yeah, I know I'm using broad strokes to get a response, but I'm just curious, like what how would you go about achieving what you outlined?
So I would privatize education.
Okay.
There would be no national oversight, no state oversight, no politician oversight.
Okay.
That frees up parents to decide what method of what education model is best for their kids. Some of them will homeschool. Some of them will band together into co-ops. You will find some people that will start a private school as a business and offer that service for a fee to whoever wants that service. And some of those schools will build in scholarship funding. Some of those schools won't. And those are just the possibilities coming off the top of my head. You could also have a variety of apprenticeships, which I know that's going to be a topic here in just a bit. And those are just the models that come to my mind at the moment. But as diverse as the free market is, you're going to have as many diverse ideas on how to educate and what education looks like for your kids. One of my favorite libertarians is a guy named Spike Cohen. And in reference to the Don't Say Gay bill, his comment was, if we actually deregulated education, if we actually took the government, all of it, out of education, and we actually had real school choice, this Don't Say Gay bill would be an issue because parents would actually choose what institutions they wanted their kids in. And, there are going to be some institutions that will teach sexual ethics one way, other institutions will teach it a very different way. And you'll have all those options available, and then the parents choose.
So thinking hypothetically, we're looking at kind of, this is kind of what schooling looked like in the past, right?
Yes.
So you had those that could afford to go to a school, went to a school. Those that could afford to have a nanny or a governess, had a governess. The kids that couldn't afford to go to school, or maybe it was a single parent situation where there just wasn't an option, those kids didn't go to school, they worked or they apprenticed. Is that kind of what you're looking at?
Those are certainly possibilities. There are private schools, and I can name at least half a dozen around here where part of their charter requires the school to have a certain percentage of students on scholarship. One school, by charter, it requires that 50% of their students are on some scholarship. So for those that wouldn't be otherwise able to afford this school, they have they have bound themselves to, they will have at least 50% of their students on some level of scholarship. And that's partial scholarship, full scholarship, just, whatever it is that the family needs for their kids to be in that school.
So my biggest, sorry.
Will some schools have scholarship programs like that? Yes. Will some schools not have scholarship programs? Yes. Will some schools, and I'm assuming that there will be buildings and such. Will some schools only allow certain kids in? Yes. Will some schools open their doors wide open? Hey, anybody who wants in, come on in, and we'll figure out how to pay for you. Yeah. So the marketplace of ideas is massive, and as many people as are out there with kids, there's probably that many different ways to educate kids,
So
and that many different ways to pay for it.
And that many random results. Like I am not going to say that I think the education system right now is like running smoothly and like everything's perfect. Like we wouldn't be having this discussion if I felt that
Right.
way. But I don't fully disagree with you, but I also feel like that's in a ideal world that I am not very confident, having worked in the school system some, that is actually the world that we're in. Like maybe we could get there, but I feel like that's a lot of kids that are just falling through the cracks. And I know we already have kids falling through the cracks, but I feel like that just opens the chasm wider.
Yeah, so I have lots of thoughts on that. First of all, part of the, and I'm not saying it's a perfect system, like Rebecca said. I don't think it's a perfect system by any means. But the fact that everybody pays in, which means everybody needs to pay attention, which everybody has to have buy-in. Everybody is paying attention to what, don't say gay bill or whatever is going on in my school district. Everybody has some level of buy-in, which brings us all together. This sort of breaking apart and letting, markets take care of everything. You think that we're divided as a country now? You think that we are compartmentalized? That would go on steroids. You think that some schools are to say, I don't want Black kids in my school. I don't want Asian kids in my school. I don't want the poor kids in my school. I only want my kids to be educated around super smart other kids that look exactly like my kids. That's exactly what will happen because human nature has always been that way and will always continue to be that way. So you just look around the world, we've whenever you have this sort of like capitalistic instinct that just runs amok, then you get people that are left out, like in dramatic ways. And so I'm not saying it's perfect, but what I think that you're saying, or what you're suggesting, is while there is some important necessities to competition, there is important, things that need to be talked about that I don't see that as a very viable solution personally for those things that I laid out. And you can respond. I'm being attacked by this fly. Whew.
So here's the difference. So yeah, you're going to have schools that say, we don't want this ethnicity or that ethnicity or this economic level. Those are institutions that I don't want my kids in. And I'll go find an institution that's far more open than that, if I need an institution. But the difference is, right now, you have the force of government requiring all those things to happen. And if those things don't happen, the government comes with guns. And so when you have at least two different sides, and they're all fighting for the control of the situation, who gets the big guns to force their ideas down everybody's throat, you're going to have a lot more division than if you allow people to freely choose. The force of government creates far more division than an environment where people can freely choose how they want to associate.
Well, it goes even deeper than that for me, because you're talking about, if I say that my kids, who and who isn't in here and what is in the curriculum, I don't want my kids learning about XYZ. because I think that's socialism, or I think that's, racism didn't happen, or I want to glass over the fact that, this and this didn't happen in history. And you can wash out parts of history that you just don't like, or your community doesn't like. And then you give your kids a world that is not an accurate picture. And that,
Yeah, you already have that. You
oh
already
yes,
have that.
oh, you're so right. We already have that, but we have public outcry all the time. We had the CRT debate on this channel, which is an important conversation to have. And it needs to be had over and over these schools. How are we teaching our kids about certain things? And that needs to be continue. The conversation needs to continue and continue and continue. If you compartmentalize out, these conversations are going to die out because I've already solved it. My group just does what it wants to do, what I'm comfortable with. And then
but it's already compartmentalized.
I'm saying you don't
You've
have
already got, you don't have what?
If you give people the situation where they're not exposed to diversity, so to speak, then you don't have to have the conversation, which means it's just a monopoly of that will, and it doesn't come up. And what I'm saying is that's not healthy for humanity. I think the beauty of America is that we have a diverse culture that gets together and can talk about these things. We can make a YouTube channel and talk about these things. And if we didn't know about it, if we weren't educated, if we were in our own little compartmentalized bubble, then we would never be challenged to think outside the box. And I think we'd be a lot dumber as humanity.
We're already forced by the threat of force to be diverse. It's not like we get to choose to be diverse. We're forced to. So when that force happens, of course people are going to resist. Of course. Look, I can name at least 3 counties right around here where the CRT debate got nasty, and there were cops called to school board meetings because parents lost their minds. It's already, that world you describe that you think is a free market, it already exists in a forced economy.
I'm just saying that some of that, we need to have that conversation, and we need to have some sort of consensus as a culture. We don't need to have consensus as a culture. We need to have the conversation as a culture, whether we have consensus or not. It needs to be brought up. And I don't think that would happen if we were so compartmentalized, which is basically the end result of what I'm suggesting your position would lead to. So before we
that compartmentalization you're talking about, we're there. We're already there. Because we're so busy thinking, all right, let my side get control, and then I'll force what I want down everybody's throat. And I can do it by the force of law.
Yeah, we don't have anybody trying to win over the hearts and minds, except for this podcast.
Right. And the reason you don't is because you have the force of government, and everybody's fighting for who's controlling it.
Exactly. And what if you take away that? What if you take away the force of government?
I am all for the separation of government from education, because I think by and large politicians use teachers, parents, administrators, students. They use them as political pawns in their petty little machinations to have control.
I think we need to have a conversation, just me and you and whoever else wants to be involved in libertarian ideology versus the other 95% of the world. And just, I'm sorry, I don't mean to, sorry to be all the other libertarians.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
No, but statistically,
you're right.
A very small position. But I think there are some compelling parts of libertarianism. I think that, but I don't think that conversation necessarily, it's been good in this conversation, but we need to move past that, because I don't want to get bogged down too much in that so much here. I think I hope we've, explored it, pretty good though. So unless anybody had any other thoughts, anybody else that didn't get to speak on that, anything else wanted they say? Anybody else want to throw stones at Paul before we move on to?
TJ?
Well, I just, maybe some small ones, but no, I would say,
Or agree. You
and
can
I
agree.
hate to wrap back to something so much earlier, but as far as negativity goes, I agree that it can be very easy to dwell on the negative, and I didn't mean to do that so much in the last podcast, but I will say that you do have to acknowledge a problem and you have to critique it in order to be able to change it, which was what I was attempting to do. Perhaps I came off heavy-handed with the idiot factories, but with that cute saying, I was attempting to simply put forward the factual evidence that there is that the schools are not doing a great job of educating our children in how to learn. They're teaching them a lot of facts, but not teaching them how to think. As far as like, you really don't have to teach people how to think, you just have to let them do it. And they're doing a bad job of allowing children to be humans and to think. And that was my critique there. And I do agree that in order to actually build consensus, you do have to have a hopeful outlook. So yes.
I think just you did a great job, like coming kind of back from that and explaining what you meant and actually, approaching it kindly. But for me, that just kind of pointed out how polarizing what we're being, like the media influences are on us, and the news sources and stuff, because they do tend to come very strongly from a specific, either the left or the right. And it's very hard not to be influenced by that, because that's what we're being bombarded with. And we're being bombarded with it because we have a system where, the people get in power for 4 years and they have a very limited time with which to actually influence anything. And half the time that they're there, I'm sorry, half the time that they're there, they're not actually doing anything other than just trying to get reelected. So again, the way to get reelected is to make people mad, right? Make people mad enough that they're going to get out there and vote. And one of the major topics that you can get everybody mad about and involved in is education, because it affects pretty much everybody. We all either have kids, are kids, or have grandkids, or know people who are in the school system. So it's a big deal. It's an important deal. But it's kind of the Mr. Rogers situation, when he says, like, when you're in a scary time or, a war situation or whatever, look for the heroes. I feel like we're almost at that point where we need to be looking for like the good stories, the things that are working in education. Look for those like places, those glimmers of hope. I think that's what we need. I think that there's a lot of the issues that are coming with education and why everybody's like, oh, it's just all messed up, it's hopeless. It's because we're not looking at the good that's happening. And there is a lot of good happening every day. It's not all bad. It's not all messed up. There's a whole lot that is working. There's a whole lot of innovation that's happening. There's a lot of new ideas that are being brought in, and that are being introduced. And there's forward momentum there. And I think that that's a lot of what we need when we come to an education debate, is not necessarily, okay, let's address the issues, let's address the things in the past that haven't been working well, but let's also look at the things that are working, at the new things that are being introduced that are, that are exciting, that are cool, that are new, that we can get behind and, start bringing people together. And then, build on that with even more new ideas and actually go, look, this is important. And we're not just going to sit here and say, oh, it's hopeless, and we can't do anything about it. And it's all, I mean, to pick on Paul a little bit here, I don't know that we need to just say, get rid of it all and, completely reinvent the wheel, but actually go, let's refine that wheel. Let's figure it out. Let's keep on making it.
Keep it rolling.
Yeah. We have something that's good. We have things that have worked. We have a system in place that is massive and it's clunky and it's, got its issues, but there's some things that are working too.
Yeah.
So
Do
let's find those.
Yeah. Do you want to explain the sound in the background so that people don't think you're torturing somebody?
Yeah, that is my 13-year-old son. He has severe autism. And he is just extremely happy listening to his YouTube videos. That's all happy noises. And his wonderful father, who's trying to usher him up the stairs to get him away because he knows that, that's a lot of noise in the background.
Yeah, we love him. And I just wanted listeners to be like, wait a second, what's the sound? What's going on? I want them to think that there was anything wrong there. So, okay, great. So, teacher apprenticeships. This is something, Rachel, you brought to my attention that I had never heard of, that I thought was really cool. Something that I'll let you introduce the concept that's going on and then we can all talk about it real quick and then move on to the last topic. But yeah, go ahead if you don't mind what you were telling me.
Well, it is a new program that they're doing across Tennessee that they're bringing in basically teacher apprentices, adults that have wanted to be or to learn how to be a teacher, but don't necessarily have the time to go to school full time. They're just going ahead and bringing them in and getting them that experience and that exposure in the classroom right there. And apparently I actually was talking to some of my friends last night about it, and that's actually something that in specific places they've actually been doing for a while now. And it seems like it's working really well. The thing that did surprise me that I mentioned to you, John, was that I read the article and I was like, oh, this sounds so great. It's going to help with teacher burnout and, all of the overcrowded classrooms and stuff, getting some other people in here, training. It's a great idea, right? And clicking on the comments, I was reading comment after comment after comment where people were just mad and they thought it was a horrible idea. And, most of the ones that were commenting were teachers. And a lot of their comments were that it undermined the education that they had worked really hard for, and that, they had to go to school and, gotten all these student loans and stuff. And that, just bringing in some yoo-hoo off the street, it wasn't, actually showing how, hard they had worked. And then the other thought behind it, which a lot of people automatically assumed that what was going to happen was you were going to bring in an untrained person and they were going to get shoved into a classroom completely on their own, and then be expected to teach and not know how.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the, automatically it was like, well, this is not going to work right.
Yeah.
They say that it's going to work this way, but no. And then, another theme that came up was, that just means that teachers aren't going to get the raises that we need. So it was position, money, and then concern for
Quality.
the failure of the program.
Yeah.
would say the way forward on that is really for what that is called well-earned cynicism. And in order to defeat well-earned cynicism, what you have to do is accept the critique, own up to the fact that when you have implemented things in the past that they have often gone wrong, or that other people have done similar things and it's not worked well, and ask for support and help in doing it from the local community, because that's what it's going to be. Because if you try to do this without buy-in, that's what's going to happen. From your community being your teachers, your parents, like get people excited about the idea, because really what it could be, not what it will be, because it's all theory right now. What it could be is many hands making lighter loads. And that would be fantastic. But also what those teachers are complaining that it could be is an attempt for lower paid people to come in and replace them. So they'd be just training their replacements. And that's not what they want to do. They want to have more teachers making things better for the kids that they care about. So it's about accepting the criticism, and humbly going before the people who matter in the situation, which is the teachers, the parents, and getting that buy-in first. So
Yeah, part of Rebecca, you look like you're going to say something there before I.
Because my face is twitching.
I have nothing to add. Sorry,
Yeah, I am thinking about something. You were just freezing, so I was confused.
Sorry.
So I can definitely understand where the teachers would be upset by that, because it's bypassing a lot of years that they had to slog through and a lot of money to get to student teaching, which they also had to do. But at the end of 3.5 years of education on learning the technical and like all of the theory behind teaching, and like, you know, I started my education degree. I didn't finish it. I decided to get married, but you know, I started down that process, and I have many friends who did finish their degree and then went out and started teaching and were like, this is insane. I don't ever want to do this again. Taught 1 year and then left.
Yeah.
So like, but then, you know, had all of their debt and then went into a totally unrelated profession. And I think that happens a lot, specifically with education, because nothing really can prepare you for the emotional and physical toll that teaching can take on you. And if it is not something that you feel called to and passionate about, it's a really hard mantle to take up. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe it's the calling for those who actually do it and stay in it. But that being said, I think there are people that should have been teachers and that have all of this great life experience. And I love that there's a way for them to come into it and not have to go through all of the education part, to be able to get in there and teach, maybe from a different perspective, because they didn't go through all of the theory. But the theory is helpful.
Yeah.
But the actual going through and learning how to teach someone is valuable. So I don't know, I'm torn on that, but I definitely understand where the teachers are coming from. And I worked a long way to get here, and then someone off the street is coming in and they're learning to do the same thing that I'm doing, but they're not maybe as well equipped, or you know, they haven't paid their dues, is kind of the mindset. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily right, because I think, you know, those people certainly could have a lot to offer in that role. But I think that is tricky, and it would have to be done with a lot of intentionality for it to work well.
Yeah, I was going to say this happened in the medical field, specifically in the lab. where in the laboratory profession, there are, you can get a bachelor's degree as a medical laboratory technologist or scientist. And then there's medical laboratory technician, which is like an associate's degree. And some states were toying with the idea, because of the shortage of laboratory professionals, of letting people with just like with no education come in and like process samples, and not doing like whatever, like in-depth laboratory processes, or use some of the analyzers that were not as advanced, didn't require any manual calculations. And there's just an uproar of like medical laboratory scientists that are like, I have this much student loan debt because my degree, and you're basically the scientific level and knowledge and theory on how to do it, and you're saying that you can do the same thing by putting the analyzer on a thing and hitting the button. It's like an outside person would come in and say, these laboratory technicians just get the sample, scan it, put it on the thing and hit the button, and then the machine does all the calculations. You don't need to pay somebody, $30 an hour to do this job, and they don't need this like advanced education to do this job. And so, but there was a huge pushback, because like, well, what if the analyzer goes down and I have to do all this manual calculations? And what if the value that I get is not adding up? If I know all the theory why behind something that's happening, I can spot why this is wrong, and and correct it, and not report false results. So there was like a huge backlash within the community for people that had advanced skills, of saying that you can't do this. But like the economic side of it was, why not? And I think that sort of the happy medium is that you have a certain number of people, but you always have people that have the higher education levels, and the theory behind it, are able to supervise. I think that is helpful. And I think that applies to the situation. As long as you have administrators that, and there's even some like issues with administrators not having, a great idea of how to educate as well. And I think that sometimes that causes a little bit of issues. And we talked about that some on I think the previous episode, but yeah, so it's not just the education field. It's a lot of fields where there's this sort of like, the economics versus the people that are in the field, and some really hard feelings, really hard feelings. And I was going to go to Paul, but Paul hates Zoom. So if he had anything to say on this. So looks like he needed to step away for a minute, which is fine. So we'll go to this last question, and then we'll see if Paul has, Paul, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes. So I'm a big fan of apprenticeships. I'm also a really big fan of understanding the theory behind what you're doing. And I think a good apprenticeship program combines those two. So you get the real world, real life experience in this case, in the actual classroom with kids. You see teachers working with the kids, and then in things like planning periods, or in other times set off when the students aren't there or not there, then the teacher goes to the apprentice and walks them through, here's why I did this way, and here's here's some reading material that you need to go through and understand, because the theory of why I did what I did is as important, and it informs how I do what I do. So I get the teachers' concern about the not communicating the theory of why, but I think a good apprenticeship program makes space for that, and not just makes space, but makes an appropriate amount of space. So yeah, that's what I have.
Not on planning periods. Yeah, it that could not easily be the teacher's responsibility who's teaching the class, because during planning periods, they're planning or trying to eat or sitting down for 5 minutes because they're exhausted because they've been running around in circles trying to teach all these kids. And like to ask more of the teacher, they're probably not going to do it. And if they do, it's going to push burnout even more because they just don't have the bandwidth to do that. They're already running on fumes.
Is what
Like
puts
if you
the
wanted
teachers?
to,
I'm going to ask a question because I don't know the answer, and then it's going to help will inform what I might or might not say next. What drives the situation where teachers are at the point where they're running on fumes, where they're just sitting down for 5 minutes to catch a break? And I ask that because I've not been on the teacher side of the equation,
so
and you have.
in an
I
ideal
can't.
world,
Mm-hmm.
you as the teacher come in, you teach the kids respectfully, raise their hands, ask their questions. You're being heard, they're receiving,
Okay.
they're understanding. Teaching
Got
is
it. Okay.
never best case scenario. There are
Okay.
days.
Got it.
So it's trying to get Johnny to sit back in his seat,
Hey.
trying to get, you sit down.
Saw that coming.
To see, to actually engage the students so that they're learning. You've got a lot of different kids and a lot of different moving pieces at a lot of different levels of that have a lot of different learning styles. So you might have your front row of kids that all need to be close to you, and they need to be looking at the board, and they need to be hearing you. You've got the kid in the back that they already know all the stuff. They're probably paying attention without much focus. Like you've organized your room so that your distracted kids are close to you. Your ones that can work by themselves are in the back. Like there's a lot of strategy that you're already doing, a lot of calculations. You have to explain it not just one time in one way, you then have to explain it another way so that you're catching as many of the kids as you can with this net that you're casting of teaching. And while all of that is going on, this kid over here is talking, not paying attention. This kid over here wants to tell you about what they did for their birthday. That was, almost a year ago now. And they really need to tell you, and you know what, you really have to listen because they can't hear anything that you're saying until they're done saying what they're saying. So you are trying so hard to communicate, and hypothetically you have all of these tools and resources and you're this resourceful teacher, but it's hard. Your voice is tired, you're on your feet, you've got another class that's another section, subject that you're supposed to be switching to in 5 minutes. You haven't finished this one. And in half an hour after that, you've got to be at the gym. And, it's all of the little pieces. If anything happens that disrupts your flow, you're compensating. You're trying to get the ship back up. And then by the time they're at something that you don't have to be at, and they're with another teacher, you just want to sit down and maybe eat a snack, because during lunch you were breaking up fights and opening packages and doing all of the things to help each kid. So those planning periods, or you're running frantically down to the copier to make copies of the thing because this kid lost their book and you need this for an assignment. It's all of those pieces. And that's why you have teachers that are always staying after work to finish things, or maybe they're grading, or maybe they're working on their lesson plan for next week. There is just, if you gave teachers an extra 2 hours that they're actually getting compensated for, they would easily fill that and probably still take some work home. So asking on top of that you break down your reasoning for why you did something, you probably can't even find the reason that you did that thing. It's just so ingrained at this point.
Intuitive.
The my thoughts on the kind of fixing the problem of the teacher apprenticing. Were honestly just a little bit of clarification and maybe setting, some expectations. Number one would be to maybe actually just, have the people that are coming in and apprenticing agree that they're going to actually be working towards their degree at the same time as they're in there filling that need. And, I think that would be what's best for, the apprentices. And then number two, guaranteeing that they're not going to be the one teaching, they're going to be an assistant. They, will not be the ones standing up, taking over the classes, because apparently that does need to be clarified. And then, number three, also just stating that, they're not going to be making as much as an assistant as they will when they actually complete their degree, get their training, and can go in with already having a whole bunch of experience under their belts. Hopefully even more than most teachers have with their, student teaching that they have to do anyway. So I feel like that to me would kind of solve that issue, is just, and again, you might not even know that you had that need to make those clarifications and those stipulations if you don't shoot it out to the general public and get their feedback and hear where the problems are. And then, having gotten all that feedback and made a plan and shared it with everybody, you can jump into it a whole lot smoother than if you're just trying to make a plan and go on your own, which I think is one of the benefits of social media, rather than, all the drawbacks that we're talking about, is it actually gives you a chance to get that input, and hopefully learn from it.
Yeah, so I think I like what you're saying, because I think it's all about educating people, like what I did there, educating people on what it is that you're doing with the program. And I think that would be interesting if you could apprentice for a time and then go get your education, or you can get your education and then come right in at a higher pay. But either way, there's sort of two different paths to teaching. I think that if there's two different paths to most professions, that would be great. You apprentice first and then you get the why, and then you can make more money. Or you can, get all that why first and then come right in and make more money, but you've spent that money up front, excuse me, on the education. So, but I think that would be good for lots and lots of degrees. And I think that's just a cultural shift. And then as far as like, I would think that it would be great to have a situation where you could have politicians come on to, local shows, if there was more people interviewing people, on these things, that like a platform for like, what are your local issues.com, and then every, district or whatever could have like, okay, education, and you could get informed from the lawmakers themselves on how these things work. And you could almost like Clubhouse or whatever Twitter has, where you can, I think it's Twitter Spaces or whatever, where you can get in and actually communicate one-on-one with people, whether it's virtually and you don't have to go to a town hall type things as well. Or you could record a question, submit it in, and then they could play that, and then that person could respond. So
yeah, I think, Rachel, that I love the idea of apprenticing. I really do. And like, in a lot of ways, that's kind of what I've done over the years, is I have worked in subbing. I've done, filling in, even when I was in high school, like working at the school that I worked at. I got a chance to actually see what the classroom felt like and looked like, and like to have that kind of grounding for, I actually think I would like to do this, before I went to school for it. And then even after, like,
how much better to know that it's something you want. I'm sorry. how much better to know that it's something that you want before you've spent all the money on the degree.
Sure.
To actually get in there and say, oh yeah, this is for me, or get in there and say, you know what, change my mind, let me go somewhere else. And that eliminates a whole lot of frustration for a whole lot of people, especially the younger people like you were.
Right. And I think
And
it also made it, what?
sorry, go ahead.
It made it easier in a lot of ways when I was going through classes talking about, behavior management styles. Like I could think of kids that it was describing. And I was like, oh, like this is what I was seeing. This is how that behavior was playing out. And I had no idea what I was looking at because I was, 17 and not well trained yet, but I had that opportunity to I already had kids popping into my head like, oh, this is a strategy I could have tried. Oh, this is a way I could have taught that concept better. This is why this worked well. And I feel very blessed. I've been able to shadow a lot of different teachers and be in a lot of different classrooms. And I've seen a lot of different styles of teaching. And that's been really good for me because I feel like I have a collection of ideas and of strategies that I wouldn't have otherwise. So I can kind of pull out of a hat of oh, I learned this from that one random student that I worked with, this one time. So it gives you it does give you a better start to have that real classroom experience, which, student teaching is good for that too. It's just a shorter window of time generally. So if you're apprenticing and taking courses at the same time, I think that would be a really helpful strategy because you're seeing kids in your head as you're reading about them or, watching whatever information, you're going, oh, that's what I'm seeing. That's a great idea to try and help this kid. So it's specific. You're using those things probably right away with the class that you're already working with. Whereas sometimes when you just get the theory and then you don't use it for 4 or 5 years, it's a little rusty.
You're getting the what and the why instead of just the how.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it does create a more cohesive plan. So
yeah, when I trained in the Navy and all subsequent jobs where I've done training, I love training people. And what I'd use is the sandwich technique. And basically I teach them first, what they're supposed to do. And then they watch me, you learn by watching me, you whatever, you see what you're supposed to do, all this kind of stuff. And then I put them in the chair and I let them do the job. And, while they're teaching me, I'm like, well, do you have any questions on this? What do you have any questions on this? Usually the questions are weak. You know what I mean? They're not having that great questions, basic questions. You put them in the hot seat to do the job, whatever they're doing. And then they get back out and they have 1,000 really great questions as they're watching you do something. And this time they're able to pick up on all the nuances. When you have that pressure of now I'm doing the job, and then, all these questions start popping up and sometimes you don't have time to process all those questions. You try to ask questions in the moment, but then I'm going to go back and then I'm going to do the job again. And I'm going to have them watch me do the job. The questions there are wonderful. Those are the best questions that you get because they are yeah, that happened to me. And that's what you did. Okay. Why did you do that? And then it's always worked best. It's been the sandwich technique is what I call it. I don't know if it has another name, but if you were to have where you learn some of the, boy, I'm stuck in my throat there. But if you were to do some training, and then you get that didactic learning, right? And then you go into the classroom like you were explaining, and you see all these things and whatever. And then you were to go back and train additionally after that and get you would be a better student that second time around than you were the first time around. I think that would be a really interesting thing if we were to introduce into college classes. You have a portion of like your sophomore year before you go into your senior year, sophomore before you go into your senior year. Seymour, what in the world? And then, oh, I'm gonna kill myself.
Okay, so I just have one real quick question. At
Sure.
what point do you have the trainee make you a sandwich? I don't understand the metaphor.
The first day before they know
Oh.
better. Just kidding. But yeah, so that's another interesting like dynamic that I think that you could introduce into college classes where, and you do have some level of this, right? But a lot of times it's like you go for an internship and then you come back to school and then you do more things. Then you're a much better student that next time around after you've seen some things and you've got those questions. You can do, like you said, you go and you look at it first and then you go back and, you're better in college because you're seeing something there. But I think that, what even reinforces it is to learn something first, then put yourself in the, hot seat and then come back and learn some more things, because it just layers and cements so much better. So, yeah. Let's see. Last question here is college debt crippling success? And I think that this has kind of come up in the conversation a little bit, and I think it came up in the conversation a little bit last time. But I will say that student loan debt and medical bills are the two largest groups of debt that people have. It's even larger than car debt. So people have more college debt as a percentage than people have of car debt, which is kind of a crazy thing if you think about only half the people in the world half of the people in the United States go to college or less.
Well, I think
more people have.
College is definitely a stronger vehicle than most cars. So.
Exactly. And I'm going to need to go get something for my throat here, but
cough drop.
Yeah. So I'm going to go grab a cough drop. I'll be right back. College debt, right? Is that crippling success? I think that I know for doctors, a lot of times they get out of school and they have so much debt that they have to work a lot of hours. And basically, I don't think that they always perform the best quality of care because you have to make a certain amount of money in order to pay back your college debt. So sometimes you are preferring higher paid procedures. You're taking insurance that reimburses higher. I think that's true in every field. I think that you're always, because you have a lot of debt, you're making decisions based on, you have to make a certain amount of money in order to pay that back. I think that we've talked about how that can be very, very difficult for teachers that have a lot of debt and then don't make a lot of money and have to go choose a different field, or they just weren't, a good fit for the field in the first place, but now they have a lot of debt. So I think we talked a little bit about this in the last episode. We touched on it briefly. And so, but I wanted to kind of jump into it a little bit further with you guys, because I think that my position has been, if you half the country didn't go to school, right? So why should the other half have to pay for the people who did go to college? It's basically, and those people usually make higher salaries when you go to college. So why are we going to subsidize people that went to college and got better jobs than us, and now we just erase their student loan debt, right? That's not really fair. But I think that a lot of people that did go to college, started to go to college, that didn't get a degree are usually the worst ones off, because you didn't get a degree, so you're not able to get, a higher paying salary, and you have all this debt. So it's not
The worst
just
off.
Do what?
The worst off are the ones with the underwater basket weaving degrees.
Yeah.
Or arts. Take your pick.
For sure. So, do you guys have any feelings about that?
Who?
Anyone? Rebecca?
I have several thoughts from what you said. I think that in the position of, people choosing to do a more expensive procedure because they're trying to make back money, I think that to some degree you're still going to have, if someone's willing to make moral decisions based on money, you're probably still going to have people making those choices based on money, whether or not debt is attached to that. But that being said, I do know that having debt does sometimes push people further into that than they would maybe naturally be inclined to.
Provides an excuse.
Or provides an excuse for it, or makes you consider it in a way that you would have dismissed otherwise if you weren't, trying to figure out how you're going to pay your mortgage. So, people in desperate situations, clearly that puts you in a different mindset for making moral decisions. But at the end of the day, it's about your moral compass when you do make those decisions. So I think that it doesn't have necessarily a great effect on that, but I don't think it would just necessarily make people make moral decisions if you took the debt away. I don't know if that's clear, but hopefully that made sense. But I do think, again, with the, the people that have worked hard to pay off their student loans, I went for 2 years and then I spent like 6 years paying off my loans. And that was after getting all the scholarships that I could find, working myself till I could barely stand up straight during college to try and not take on more debt. So I was able to pay my debt off in a reasonable amount of time, but only because Josiah didn't have college debt as well. So we were just working on my debt. Mm-hmm. But then I look around and I'm like, we were putting every spare penny toward that. And then some people come out with all of this debt and then they're mad that they have to pay off their debts. Like, that makes me feel frustrated. And then if their debt gets eradicated, now I'm mad because I killed myself in college. I killed myself after college. We pooled our resources. We pushed, like, no, I don't want somebody else to have to go through that, same scenario. But I also feel a little gypped if somebody else doesn't have to. So should colleges be more affordable in the first place? I feel like maybe we should have some more options, but I also think that there are a lot of options. And if you don't want to go into deep debt for school, you don't have to. There are ways around getting into more debt than you can handle, but it's just expected now that you're going to graduate high school and then you're going to go to college and you're going to graduate and then you're going to pay off your debt for the debt for the next 20 years. Like, that is kind of what has been accepted as this is how you do college. And there are, maybe it takes you longer and you take less classes and you go to a community college, but there are other options besides just eradicating everyone's debt that didn't think about the end game when they went to get their degree.
Well, that's been
so
accepted.
I don't know. Maybe I'm not very compassionate about it, but
oh yeah, but I think that I'm just looking at it from a from an economic point of view where that's been accepted as normal for our generation to be paying on it for the next 20 years, but used to be, 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago, you could get out of school, you could go buy a house, you could, all by your 20s, by the time you're 30s, you don't have school debt, you're already building equity in a home. And now if you're paying on that loan for 20 years and you're paying on your car and renting, and then you don't get into a house until you're in your 30s, and 40s, And, then you're not building that equity in your home, and you're not passing on as much generational wealth. It's slowing the cycle down. And I don't think that we should be accepting that as a society as normal, that college debt. So I also agree that I think we should be making college, we need to make colleges take the responsibility of, and I think we touched on this in the last episode a little bit, I think, about colleges taking on that responsibility of providing that loan, not the government. The government should not be subsidizing these loans. It should be the the college, because if you don't get out and you don't pay that loan back to them, then they're the ones that have to write off that loan. They're the ones that have to chase you down for that loan. So it puts the burden of, we want quality education so that you can go get a job. We want to make sure that our students get out of here with good degrees. We're not going to offer basket weaving because people don't pay those loans back to us because they're not making enough money. So that automatically balances itself out by just taking the government out of it. So that's the solution, the best solution as far as I can tell, for how you get the cost of college down. But I think that what we have right now is a crisis, a crisis. We have, because largely our generation, the millennial generation, has accepted that that's okay. That's normal, that you can take on all this debt and you're just going to be paying that off forever, and you're never going to get into a home, and you're losing valuable years. The opportunity cost of being able to get into a home and put back wealth is largely not there. So what do you do for all those people? You and I worked hard and paid off our student loans. Between Jasmine and I, we've had a pretty significant amount of loans. We're able to pay that off. But I was also able to get into a home, use the GI Bill, and then refinance that home to pay off my student loans. So I was able to just financially maneuver all around, but not everybody gets the GI Bill. And now I'm going to be taking college classes in the summer and use the GI Bill again. And so the military has allowed me to do all the sort of maneuvering financials, the way that I've done it. And that's been a lot of hard work. And, I work pretty hard in the military, to get these benefits. But I look at a lot of other people that, are in, very dire situations, $50,000 worth of debt, and they're not making $50,000 a year even, and they don't have homes and they're in the 30s. That's a bad financial place to be in your personal life, but it's also times that by thousands of people in our population. It's a crisis, it's a personal crisis, but it's also a societal crisis. And so, yes, that's how we fix the cost of college. There's a way to fix the cost of college, but then also, what do we do about the people that are in this situation? You and I have been able to, push through, but there are some people that have not, and they're way behind the curve, and that's bad. I see that as bad, and I don't know how to do it. And I feel jealous because they get, their debt written off or whatever, but also too, I don't, because I don't want everyone around me to be crippled by debt. So there's kind of I have a little bit of mixed emotions as well. But I don't know. And Rachel and Jason, Rachel and Paul and Matt, go ahead and chime in. Anybody that's ready, fire away.
I mean, from the macro level, I was actually thinking about that as well, where it doesn't seem to affect you. But if people are, not even stable in their 30s, then they're not having kids. They're choosing not to. And that has, maybe there's other issues, but it's a very convenient excuse not to have children, because you just don't feel like you could have children right now or get married. Those things are factors, very significant factors that have continued to push back the age of marriage and childbearing, to the point where if we're up to Americans who are at least second generation, then America's population would be so far into decline that our economy would be collapsing under its own weight. If we did not have immigration, America would have already been in a very dire straits. The shortage of workers that we have right now is nothing compared to what we would have. So there are societal repercussions to crushing debt. But we've allowed for a lot more debt than is wise, because there's that feeling that there's going to be somebody to come to your rescue, if you fail. You can always fall back on bankruptcy, which it has its place, but there should also be some accountability there too. So there's a culture of debt. There is that expectation that people are going to make it back, which is unrealistic, and that is a culture of lies. that college is the be all end all for being able to get a good job. The culture of requiring things that are not needed, and inefficiency that has crept into our businesses. It's horribly inefficient to hire college trained dishwashers. Why are we requiring that? Why are businesses requiring people to be college educated to do something that does not require college education? It's horrible inefficiencies that have crept into there. While I generally agree that the free market is a great idea, it it sometimes, because of the same reasons that the government is problematic, the sometimes free market will also cause issues. And I'm not talking about this without a base. The Bible spends a great amount of time talking about just weights and measures. When it's talking about that, it's talking to two things. It's talking in condemnation of the business people who are doing the wrong, and also condemnation of the rulers who are not doing their governance job, whatever you want to term that, Paul. They're not doing their job of making justice available to the poor. And so it's just, from a macro level, things always fall apart when the morality of the individuals begins to fall apart. So any solution that we have has to really come in both directions. You can't say that debt is bad, therefore, we have to eliminate debt. We have to have a better option than debt. If businesses are requiring you to go into debt in order to be able to get into those businesses, then you can't be completely at fault that you took too much debt on. It requires a holistic solution. It requires looking at things from a personal level, like, can I afford to take on this debt? What's my responsibility to wisdom in relation to debt? And also, it's a responsibility of the individual companies to look at things and say, hey, we're doing things that don't make any sense, causing people to take on too much debt. And that's going to require conversations, because cultural expectations in companies are a lot easier to change than you think. Yeah. It's not hard. It's not impossible. Not is what I'm saying. It's not like it's easy. It's hard. Changing people's minds about anything is hard. We're all pretty stubborn. But
I think this ties back into the conversation earlier that we were having. I think that a lot of the points that you're making are tying back into, why do people feel bitter that people in the healthcare field are coming in at entry level and able to do this job when I had all this education and I paid all this money for my education? Why do teachers feel like, I spent all this money and all this time learning all this stuff, and then you're going to come in here and, make this money and do this same job that I'm doing. And, that threatening feeling of like, I have thousands of dollars of thousands and thousands of dollars of student loan debt, and you don't, and I have, put my time in and my effort into this, and it's going to increase that feeling of burnout, that now you can just come in here, there was a gate for me to go through and you don't have that same gate to go through. That feels bad. So, Rachel and Paul, you feel free to chime in. I just want to tie that back a little bit there, because it seemed like what you're saying. Rachel, do you have any thoughts on college debt crippling success?
I guess my perspective is, I know what I faced going to college. I know what my husband faced going to college, but I also have children who are coming up, getting very close to entering college themselves. And I think that when you have your children facing those things, you have a different mentality about it than when you look at, your peers. You go, you kind of lose that whole resentment factor of, why did they, not have things, or have things easier than I did? You go, I want my kids to have it easier than I had. I don't want them to face the hardships and the challenges that I did. But on the other side of that, I also agree that I don't want my kids to have it too easy. You know, I think that there is value in having to really determine what you want for your life and then have to work to figure out how to do it in the best way possible. And I don't want them to just have it handed to them because they don't value it when it's just handed. So there is that, you know, if you know what you are doing, there are ways to go to college relatively cheaply. There are grants out there, there are scholarships out there. There, you know, in Tennessee, we've got 2 years of community college that you can, you know, that's already free. And taking advantage of those programs that are out there weeds out the people who are going, or the kids who are going to really try and really strive for it, and the ones who just, you know, are drifting. And I think that that weeding out is important to do. It's important for them, and it does, you know, but at the same time, you know, I'm all for having more of those programs and more of those ways to lessen the expense of college. I am more for, you know, having the accountability that you're talking about, you know, Joe Mark, for the loans, you know, on the colleges, where they are actually making sure that the programs that they're offering, you know, are going to be able to have a return on investment. So yeah, there's a lot of different thoughts there, but ultimately I am more for tweaking the system that is in place than completely kind of overthrowing it. I think that you get a lot farther if you make little changes at a time in our society, and that you really explain them as you go, because we do have such a lot of diverse opinions and thoughts and perspectives on everything. And
Buy-in.
yeah, you got to have the buy-in. You have to have people understanding what it is that they're doing, because we want that. We want that choice. We want that input, because the things that we have a say in, we get excited about and
Yeah.
we continue in. And I think that it's another thing that I was talking about with my group of friends last night. You know, they were talking about, I asked the question, you know, how do you actually get people excited for what's going on in your school? You know, how do you get the parents and the teachers and the admins and everybody on the same page? And one of the things that one of my friends said was, you know, get people involved. That it's long and the short of it, if you have the parents actually involved in what's going on at the school, and not, you know, going crazy running around doing fundraisers, no, but actually, you know, she said that, you know, there was one example of when there was a group of dads that came into a school, and they were doing the security stuff, and, you know, just walking up and down the hallways, and that like really changed the entire energy of the students and how the behavior and stuff that was in that school. Is just having that group of dads walking the hallways, you know, and they were filling a temporary need, but it really made a difference. And I think that yeah, that may just be the key. It's a very simple key, but I think that's a starting place anyway.
Yeah. Paul, do you have any thoughts on college debt crippling success?
Yeah. So when I went to get a student loan, I actually had to go to a bank. I didn't go directly to the government. I had to fill out FAFSA forms, but I actually went to my local bank and filled out a loan papers for student loan. I went to the business office of the school and I saw my student loan check for about 5 seconds, which is about the time I needed to, which inside that eternity of 5 seconds, the person at the business office put my check on the table, turned it upside down. I signed it. They took it away and I never saw it again. Rachel's the only one I can think of that may have had that same experience. But I don't think the rest of you, I think the rest of you, if you got a loan for school, you probably filled out paperwork directly to the government and not to a lending institution of some sort. Am I correct?
Yeah, I was on a website, Navinet or something, whatever. I don't remember exactly what it was, but
Okay.
I'm not certain, but I believe
Matt?
mine was actually to the I should say the forms that I filled out were at the college, and then they actually took care of the loans. But I'm not 100% certain if that's how it worked.
But that probably went to the federal government
yeah, they probably
and
have
not to a
relationship.
lending institution like a bank.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Rachel,
ended
did
up
you
in a
go to a
governance-
bank or do you remember how yours went?
I went with Dad to this conference in a hotel that was all about how to get grants and scholarships and funding, loan funding. And they had all the paperwork there in this little conference for seniors. And we filled it all out and sent it off. So I didn't actually go to a bank, but I'm pretty sure that the applications and stuff that I was filling out were for a bank. It just was kind of a little extra step to get there.
Okay. Rebecca, how did yours go down?
It was all at the school business office. I don't think it was through a bank for any of those forms, but I'm not entirely sure.
I think it was similar to the way a
So,
dealership does.
Yeah.
Do what?
I believe it was similar to the way a dealership does, where they get the loans for you on your behalf, and they're guaranteed by the federal, whatever it is. But those are through individual institutions. So
more that going to an institution is, those days are done, gone. And I know this because I know somebody who worked in education and saw this shift happen. So students go to a government website, they fill out the forms, they get approved, and most of the time they get a debit card. And you're supposed to take that debit card and let the school scan or let school run it, and the school gets their money for tuition. You can go to the bookstore, you use it to buy books, and you spend that on your college education. Well, any debit card that says Visa or MasterCard on it, guess where else you can go with it? To Walmart to get your Xbox.
Oh, oops.
Or a variety of other places. You can go to the Apple store to get whatever garbage Apple offers, or you can go to AT&T and get a nice phone. So on top of that,
you're leaving a
on
paper
top
trail.
on top of that, parents can get parent loans for their kids for school. Oh, guess what? Sometimes parents and some of the kids do. They get newer car. They get a car or clothes or whatever. So there's so the oversight and controls that happened when I went to school don't exist anymore. Yes, Tennessee has free first 2 years of community college. But how is that funded?
Are you asking
Anybody know how that's funded?
through
What?
taxpayers, I assume?
Through what?
Taxpayers?
Kinda the lottery. Though.
Through the lottery.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I
It is
have a problem
funded
with
through the lottery.
because most poor people are the ones
and-
buying lottery tickets. Because if you're rich, you're not buying lottery tickets because you don't need it. But if you're poor, you're wanting to get your chance. So literally, poor people are funding this people's education. So it's like a tax on poor people to send kids through college. That is insane.
Wealthy people buy
Right,
stock
and government,
if they want risk.
if a private institution wants to run a lottery and wants to fund education, fine. Government shouldn't be doing that.
So you're in favor of the lottery scholarship?
If a private company started a lottery and they wanted to take some of their proceeds and fund schools, that would, I still wouldn't, I probably wouldn't let my kids use that as a means of going to school, but that bothers me less than a government running a lottery. But so here's what happens when you start doing massive student loan debt. Well, also, if you go long enough after your student loan, after you have to start paying your student loan, at some point, I think it's 10 years out, whatever existing student loans you have left, those get forgiven.
What? No.
My mom did that. My mom did that.
What?
She
She paid what was
employee
good
or-
in her student.
What was her?
Yeah, I think that's if you're
criminal
government
justice.
employed.
What?
Her major was criminal justice, and she went long enough on. I mean, she paid her student loans down long enough, but after 10 years, and I think the catch was you have to make consistent, regular, every month, make your payment, and after 10 years, the balance gets forgiven.
Yeah, and you have to work within your field, and it's only good for healthcare
No,
fields.
she never worked inside the field. She never worked inside the field.
Okay, my understanding
She
is
never-
with that there is like that's because a lot of colleges tell you that it can be forgiven after 10 years or whatever. But my understanding, because I heard that too when I signed up for my student loans, and but my understanding is that like 3% of people actually get to do that. So it's kind of it's one of those things where it's very, very rare. And I'm happy that she did, but for some reason, I don't remember all the reasoning behind it, but a lot of those promises never actually go through for a lot of people.
It's you can't miss a payment. You have to make, every payment has to be on time. The amount you pay every month has to be the amount at minimum, the amount that you pay every month has to be the amount you agree to pay. But if you pay that minimum amount every month on time for 10 years, then the balance of the debt at the end of 10 years gets wiped out.
Let me go ahead and read from the site. To qualify for PSLF, I'm sorry.
And
Is
my
that right?
mom never worked a day in the field, ever.
Okay.
Go ahead.
To qualify for PSLF, you must be employed by a U.S. federal, state, local, or tribal government or not-for-profit organization, which is probably where she worked.
No.
Federal cert. Well,
She
then this
worked
can't
for
be
none of
what
those.
she
She
was.
worked for a private hospital in their child care department.
Yeah, healthcare.
Probably,
That's what I was saying.
yeah, but I'm going to say probably.
It was a private for-profit hospital system.
possibly under nonprofit?
No, it was for profit.
Okay. Well,
It was not a not-for-profit.
So here's why that becomes very difficult, because your mother did a great job. She stayed in a field that was qualified her, and she never missed a payment. But a lot of people in 10 years, that's a tough thing to do, to never miss a payment or never be late on a payment, and to always work in, what if you work in the healthcare field, but you it's not for you, what if you can't take care of babies on the ward, the maternity ward or whatever, and it's not.
No. She worked in.
I'm not saying her. I'm saying
department.
what if somebody who's in that field that went to college, went to get educated in a certain specific field, and one of those qualifying ones, like healthcare and I think law enforcement, government, but they weren't able to stay in their field. They didn't want to stay in their field, and they changed fields, and then they don't qualify for that, forgiveness program. So, but it is a good point. I'm just trying to tie the knot. So go ahead with your thought though.
There's one last thing. When something gets subsidized, when a product or service is subsidized, whoever owns that product or service sees the subsidy, and then they figure out, oh, we can charge more and we can make more money. So you subsidize education through government loans and grants, and you do massive student loan debt forgiveness. When that becomes the norm, and as soon as it happens the first time, it will become the norm, then schools will see, oh, we'll raise our rates, we'll solve some of our financial problems, government will take care of it, or somebody else will take care of it, and we can have more money. And some of those schools are schools that probably should shut down because they're so poorly managed, that they're not doing anybody any favors by existing. Some of those schools will take the win and do good things with it. But the more you subsidize it, the more expensive it's going to get.
Yeah, and I think
student loan debt forgiveness is a form of subsidizing it.
I think we totally agree on that. My broader concern or issue, whatever, is that what it's doing to the damage that we've already done. We've already done a lot of damage. So how can we, come back from the edge? Because I really think we're just at a point where we're pretty unsustainable, and I've been thinking about this a lot in the context of the next episode that we'll be doing and talking about globalization and how, we're in this like late stage of sort of like the cycle that we're in as a society. And if we don't do some things to back off of the edge in a pretty dramatic way, then, it's we're in a really, really bad spot. When, like Matt said, if we're not, because you can't get a home because you have all this debt until you're later in life, so you're not having kids, so the population is shrinking, and then we're very anti-immigration, so now we're not bringing in workers, we're not doing anything, we're not doing any manufacturing here for a lot of jobs. I mean, like we're in a really bad spot. I mean, like it's like setting up for like a pretty bad, I wouldn't say a perfect storm, I would say a very imperfect storm. It's a lot of things stacking up, and I think that this is one piece of the puzzle that is very I think it's a dangerous place that we're in. And like I said, I would like to take the subsidies out of college going forward, but what do we do about this massive extensive student loan debt that we already have? Because I just don't know that everybody is going to be, from what I've seen, is like 4% of people qualify for this debt forgiveness after 10 years. That's a pretty low amount of people that probably signed up for, a lot of student loan thinking that they were going to be able to do that. Because life doesn't always go like you want. Life doesn't go, in a linear path. and you don't always get into the field
Right.
that you want to be in, and it doesn't always, work out for you. So, so we fix that for the next generation, but we also have to fix it for the current generation. And, we talked about the housing crisis on another episode previous to this, way back now, feels like. And your part of the housing crisis is, we've sort of sped that up now with the Fed increasing these rates. I think I saw today that currently, what is it, April? Well, it's the day before Easter. So it's April 16th, and the mortgage interest rates are like 5%, which when I refinanced this house back in October, so like 6 months ago, it was like 3.5 still. So you're talking about a crazy jump in the amount. 5% is still not crazy, but you're talking about in that short amount of time, the average, that's going to discourage a lot of buyers from actually buying. People refinancing is going to slow down. It's going to, it's going to slowly chug to a halt. And we've already, we're seeing, the planting season in Ukraine and Russia's being delayed. The price of oils, oil and gas, oils, vegetable oil, things like that, grains, all these things aren't going to be going to market in the fall. And if you're talking about now the housing crash, the famines around the world, and our people in the United States can't even afford, basics, and you have debt. If you can't afford the basics, you just cut your lifestyle back. But if you've got all this debt, those debt payments still keep coming, and it's going to set up for, a very, very bad situation. So I look at this sort of like thing. I think I've gotten, not changed my position a little bit, but sort of like looking at it through a different lens. It becomes like, not just like, well, we shouldn't pay for these other people's student loan debts because they're, like I had to pay for mine, so daggum, you got to pay for yours, And I've kind of like gotten to a point where I'm kind of like, ooh, as a society, we're in such a bad spot where, zooming back, I mean, there's a place for this discussion. So I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, and it's more rhetorical than anything else. At what point do we say that, yes, life's going to do what it's going to do? We can plan for the next 5 seconds and all of that go horribly wrong, or the next 5 or 10 years and none of that work out. At what point do we stop subsidize? Or what point is it okay to say, you know what, you've taken some risks, and we all have to take risks, and that risk didn't pan out the way you wanted it to, and you do have to live with some of those consequences. At what point do we say everybody's got to take risks? That's the nature of life, and we can't subsidize risk out of the equation, because quite honestly, we actually need as individuals, we need to take risks.
So let me put it to you like this. I punish my kids when they don't obey, right? When they don't do what they're supposed to do, because it's my job to teach them that consequences have actions, right? So let's say my child messes up really, really bad, really, really bad. And did I freeze or something? Everybody's laughing.
No, you said consequences have actions.
Yes, consequences do.
And they
have
do.
actions. Okay, no, actions have
They
consequences.
do. And actions have consequences.
I'm trying to teach my children that. So what happens when my child does something that's very, very bad and potentially could set them, let's say they came to me and said, I did such and such and such, and I messed up. Okay. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take you down to the police, and they're going to put you in juvie for a couple of years, because actions have consequences. No, consequences have actions.
Life.
And you have to learn, you're a young child and you made a stupid decision, and you're going to have to learn. And this is what the law says, and you're going to have to do it. So I turn my child in and they get out and now they have a criminal record. Now they can't get a job. Now I've destroyed their future, you know, to a certain extent, because I wanted to teach them the consequences have actions to a child. I feel like, did I say it wrong again? Dadgummit.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
ingrained at this point.
So anyway, this is not supposed to be a joke. It's supposed to be a very serious thing.
Sorry.
I think that
But there are parents that
is you need to learn, you need to have some sort of, but the consequences have to fit the crime, but there also has to be, my job as a parent is to teach you how to succeed in life and how to, you genuinely came to me and you apologized and you understand the depth of how you messed up. So in grace, I'm going to allow you to not suffer the full extent of the consequences that you would deserve, so that you, I don't know, is this a bad example? Rachel?
I think my rules are universal. Grace is individual, would be my answer to that. I think that if you have a rule that's in place that is in order to teach people to make wise decisions beforehand, that if you undermine those rules publicly, that you lose what those rules were intended to do. But when I have a child that has royally messed up, like you were saying, and they come to me and they say, you know, look, I've learned I can't, you know, I don't know how to actually deal with the consequences of my actions. That's when I can individually make that judgment call on whether my child has actually learned the lesson or not, based off of what I know about that child. So I think that, you know, kind of taking that on a broader scale, I think that you would need to have some guidelines for sure, where and times when you can go, you know, if you meet this criteria, you know, and you're really in a pickle and you can't pay this back, you know, then you can come to us and we can see about setting up, you know, either an individual payment plan or lessening the payments, you know, something like that, that can offer that grace, but it's on an individual basis.
So let me suggest that we privatize, you know, we let banks take the responsibility for, you know, these, or this colleges themselves, not even a private bank, the college themselves has to finance these. If they're going to allow students to use debt to pay for their education rather than paying it up front, then that college has to take that debt on, that burden on, that risk, so to speak. And that fixes it going forward for the younger siblings, right? But for that older sibling that's still in a pickle, we lower those payments down so it's something that's manageable, and then offer, you know, in 20 years, you know, this could be paid off. So now they have 20 years of hard labor, you know, to pay off these, you know, gargantuan loans that they did take out, and that was the system at the time. But the next generation coming up will have to make payments that are reasonable based on the degree that they're getting. So you've created a situation that's reasonable for the current ones that are in that situation that took out $50,000 of debt for basket weaving, which is not a rational decision, you know, or whatever. That's the extreme example, but people don't, there are a lot of people out there that have just taken on a lot of debt for a reasonable degree, but that was the college that they wanted to go to. You know, it's $50,000 at this private school to get a business degree, you know, but I can only get a business degree. I mean, a job in my town where I want to live and raise my kids is going to pay me $30,000, $40,000 a year. It's going to take me a long, long time to pay that off. But the payments on that 50,000 thing are going to take are going to be gargantuan. If there's some sort of relief for me to bring that down, then that can help offset the burden. And so, yeah, so that's my solution, sort of, that I came to on the fly.
So I want to piggyback on Rachel just a little bit. Maybe not. There are, and I know of a few situations where there are parents that said, we have offered mercy and mercy and mercy and mercy and mercy and mercy. And the behavior hasn't changed. And so now we're going to allow for severe mercy. And yes, you're going to face prison time. Yes, you're going to face jail. You're going to go to trial. You're going to have to pay for your trial. I have friends that with their oldest child, they will go to court with their child and be there, but they're no longer offering money. They're no longer trying to shield the child, because shielding the child, that kind of mercy, has not taught the child that, oh, I've really got to change because this is not going well. This is going to go bad for me if I don't fix this behavior pattern. And they have said, we will not contribute to your attorney. We will not contribute to any fees, any court costs or fees like that. If you end up going to jail, we will not pay any of those fines that go with it. That is entirely all on you now.
It went to jail for student loans. Did I miss something? I'm sorry.
No, it wasn't for student loans. It wasn't for student loans.
Okay.
But you said you had said it might be time to be done with the episode. But a little while ago you said, as a parent, if my child comes in and they're repentant and all of that, then I'm going to back off on the consequences. That's not always the case that happens. And that's why Rachel's absolutely right that mercy and that grace has to be individual, right, and not blanket, because there are situations where the most merciful thing you can do is let them feel the full blunt force trauma of the consequences of the actions they've taken.
Yeah, of course.
It's not easy. It's not pleasant. It will tear you apart as a parent. And my friends, it is tearing them apart. But Rachel's absolutely right. You set the rules for how things go, and that's how it goes for everybody. And then you make space for mercy when it's necessary, when it makes sense. But sometimes severe mercy, facing the full blunt force trauma of the consequences of your actions, is the appropriate mercy, is the appropriate grace.
I guess the only reason I use that expression, or well, not the only reason, but part of the reason why is because I feel like there is an outside force on the society, and we've talked about this a little bit in previous episodes with just the society as a whole, as a macro position, is threatened by outside forces. So if you're talking about this, like back into the analogy, the family is being threatened by outside forces, and you're talking about locking up your child to hold them accountable, which again, there might be situations where that is warranted for them to feel that blunt force trauma of the punishment. But then also, I don't know that, it is a case by case situation, but I don't know that this is the case. I guess that's what I'm debating. And that's the part of it that I'm trying to cycle or to get out here is this possibly a case where we would be damaging all of us by letting, a generation, so to speak, and even a generation to come, coming into this, because, even though we put forth the solutions, by letting the colleges take the risk, that isn't a current policy. There's nobody talking about this, in the political arena. It's just us with this, concept here. But I don't think that you take away those consequences without fixing the underlying issue. You don't write off all this debt without fixing without fixing the reason why people are going into debt. You can't do one without the other, but you have to do that one first, so anyway, yeah. Let's give everybody parting thoughts. This has been a long episode. I believe, I don't know, we've had to we're gonna have to cut a little bit part of it out. And I wrote another question in here that I'm not even gonna, as we were thinking about, that I'm not gonna add into it because it's been long. So, but yeah, so we'll get some parting thoughts, and then we'll just go around, starting Matt, Paul, Rebecca, and then Rachel, and parting thoughts on this episode. And you can either pass or give some thoughts as we go out. So go ahead, Matt. Anything you might want to add to this conversation?
No, I mean, I think I've said most everything that I wanted to say. Education is a very important thing. I would say that that's one thing that's not been said, is how important education is to the entirety of society. So miseducation is that much more problematic. And so part of the problem with miseducation, as in teaching people things that are not true as if they were, is
factories,
bad motivation. It is forces in the market that are alien to it, such as the government's being a provider of education instead of providing the funds for education, which is totally different. I would be okay with having maybe a state level, definitely the local level, but maybe a state level redistribution of funding, but that shouldn't have anything to do with the state being able to control the schools. States controlling the schools is just a very bad idea. It tends to cause poison in the well. So that would be my parting one addition to what I've said before. And I really appreciate, the things that Rebecca and Rachel have said. So,
and not Paul.
To some degree. No, I think Paul, it's just that it's a very holistic, it's a holistic approach that doesn't allow for anything soon. I agree that there may be in concept a way to make this work, but it would require an entirely different society to do so. So yeah, I don't know. At least wise, I don't understand it well enough to implement small changes. So
sure. All right, Paul, parting thoughts.
Government bad, market good.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's
you're always welcome here, and I love you, but those words just make me cringe. Sorry. All right, Rebecca, parting. Oh, were you
yeah.
Go ahead.
Nope, I'm good. I'm done.
Okay, I thought you were just trying to be funny and part out. All right, Rebecca, parting thoughts.
One, your hand is going through a light bulb.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think, yeah, this one was a little harder for me to feel as passionate about, except for, describing the distress in the classroom sometimes. But I think, in the last episode, we talked a lot about how do we change things for the better? How do we go about implementing those smaller changes that can make a big impact? And one of the things that just keeps coming up is the apprenticeship element. And I think that using apprenticeships more widely for so many more professions is just a good move across the board. If for no other reason that we have so many people that are tactile learners that learn better doing it. And that's always been a struggle for the classroom, has been getting those tactile learners to be able to learn in a tactile way. And, you know, they're not saying that it can't be done. It certainly can be done, and it is being done, but it is a harder thing to implement. It is much easier to reach the kids that can just read the information or hear the information and learn the information. That's kind of how our schools, you know, if everybody learned that way, things would be much easier. So, you know, not necessarily at an elementary level, but even middle school and high school and college, putting more apprenticeship options. This is something that Josiah and I have talked about. You know, hopefully eventually we'll be able to homeschool our kids that we don't have yet. And having them work on projects and use math to help them build things, using like actually learning scientific principles by doing experiments, and just making sure that we are teaching in a more holistic way, in a way that reaches your different types of learners. So that's something I just wanted to throw in there. If someone listens to this one and didn't listen to the last one. That's my plug for go back and listen to the other one. I feel like we solved a lot of the world's problems in that.
Thank you. Rachel, any parting thoughts here?
Yeah, I think that I'm agreeing a lot with Rebecca in that the last episode was so good and covered so many things. And I don't know, maybe when I go back and watch this episode, I'll understand what happened a little bit better, because I'm still sitting here going, what did we even talk about? I know it was good. We talked about a lot, but yeah. One of the things that goes to kind of those small solutions, or, you know, small changes that can kind of improve on things, is something that Leia and I were bouncing around. We were watching the tail end of the first episode this morning, and she was saying, and yeah, I think that it's a brilliant idea, is, you know, if you had like introduction to in high school, talk specifically about high school because that's what she's in, like introduction to the different topics, rather than just, you know, letting somebody choose, well, do I want to do trigonometry or whatever, because you guys were talking about that at the time, and I absolutely loved the way y'all were discussing it, was going, you know, well, what if you did a course that gave them the exposure to the topic and an introduction to it, and also as part of that introduction to the topic, you had a presentation on what it was used for in real life, what career paths you could actually take with this, because I think that a lot of times in, you know, high school, you get the whole, what am I even going to use this for? You know, how does this apply to real life? And being able to present that in an introduction where you have an introduction to every topic that is a requirement, so that they get exposure to all those different topics, but then actually going into the full-on class, have those actually as elective, and, you know, being more of a picking what is actually interesting after somebody's been exposed to it enough to understand what it is that they're, you know, whether they like it or not. And yeah, I think that thought may not make a whole lot of sense if somebody has not watched the previous episode. So second plug, go back and watch, you know, the first episode on education, because it was fantastic. And yeah, lots of kind of thoughts and stuff that came up as I was watching it, to, you know, oh, well, you could do this, you know, So I wish we'd gotten a little bit more into that, but I'm glad that, we did cover what we did. And yeah, was there anything else I was supposed to have final thoughts on? Because I took that and just rabbit trailed with it.
Oh yeah, that's great. I like that. I think that, with the invention of YouTube, there's a lot of videos out there of like, okay, why do I, parents can, like with Chloe, if she asked me, why should I learn trigonometry? I pull up a YouTube video. This is what trigonometry is about. This is the value of it. Oh, I want to join the the military or the Peace Corps, or I'm thinking about being a firefighter or whatever. Okay, this is what firefighters do. Like, oh, I want to be in the medical field. Okay, this is what a doctor does. Well, this is what this type of doctor does. This is what, whatever. What is being she wants to work with animals. What does a vet tech actually do? What does a veterinarian actually do? What's a day in the life of? There's all these videos for all these different things that you can do. And so I think that that's one thing that I don't know that there's a lot of parents that really know that there's all these resources out there that you can do that,
We need a little bit more in depth than that to actually where you're actually kind of getting the first 2 weeks. Because I don't know about like public school curriculums, but homeschool curriculums, the first 2 weeks typically of any subject that you do is very much an introduction and starting it out. And just to that point of where you've gotten that much exposure, you get a pretty good handle on whether this is something that you're interested in and you might want to keep on going with.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you're right. I think that there probably should be something, and probably done by educators, specifically, maybe colleges, on what this field is about, and boiling it down, because I feel like you could make a very good, with the right teacher, you could probably make an hour-long video that introduces people to a pretty good concept of what a course is about and what you could do with this knowledge, and that would be good enough to tease it out. But that's just my first thoughts on it. I might think about it a little bit more and come up with something different, because that has happened with a lot of these episodes. I tell you what, we get into it and then I start watching another video or something, or thinking about it a little more deeply, and I'm like, man, you know what I said? I don't necessarily agree with some of it, but that's okay. I think that's the point of this conversation, because it really is a launch point. So after I edit all this, is probably going to be about 2 more hours on education, part 2. And the first one was 2.5 hours. So if you have hung with us for 5 hours, 5+ hours for all of this, first of all, you need to get some sort of award. You need to tell the Johnny Random Show or leave a little comment. Like, I watched all of this. Okay. So if you're seeing this, I need you to type in the comment section, I watched all of this. And I'm going to, make some sort of award, and you can print it off, put it on your wall that you watched all this. So,
NFT, man. Make an NFT.
NFT.
Yeah.
It's not a bad
buy
idea.
a little NFT, or I can sell you a little NFT, or give you, I don't know exactly how we do that, but yeah, that you hung with us. So it has been a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed this one. I feel like this is one of the easiest conversations for all of us because of our backgrounds. So thank you for watching the Johnny Random Show today. Like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next episode.
All right. See y'all later. I got a dog that's desperately lonely.
Oliver has been over here just farting for the last 30 minutes. It smells so bad in here. Oh.
I have Ethan trying to tell me to turn the lights off, so yeah, I gotta go.
This is my hair, and when I fished
Go ahead,
it
you can turn
smelled
off
like
stuff.
pine, and I'm very
we're
and concerned.
Yeah.
It's 11:15 in Eastern time. I'm ready to go to bed.
There's a lot to edit too, so I will see y'all later.
Oh man, take care.